One. Boop. Hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host, Keegan. And this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And I got a question for you, real quick. Do you know what it is to be like whenever you're a troubled youth? Well, I know I do. But what if the place you sent your child for help ended up breaking them instead? Well, Corey Gentry survived the troubled teen industry, the system that turns trauma into profit, and he's now exposing the truth and helping parents, educators, and professionals recognize the red flags to help others avoid a similar or worse fate. So, Dr. Corey, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well, Keegan. Thanks so much again for having me on the show and being so gracious with my technical difficulties. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, of course, my friend. And that's the thing is that technology is as wonderful as we love it and as wonderful as it can be, we love it, but there's so many things wrong with it at the same time. We have these expectations of it. Whenever they don't follow expectations, we get really mad really easy. And I feel like that's kind of similar to like teens, because they're
Yeah,
growing up and parents have this idea of who they want their child to be, but maybe they're not following their expectations and suddenly they're troubled. And is that kind of how it goes? Or let, let's hear your story.
that's a fantastic segue and a great conversation starter, Keegan. So thanks so much. And I do think that is a lot of really a lot of what happens is when we talk about teenagers or the teenage years, it's almost as if we're talking about it as if it's a mental health diagnosis in and of itself. And
Yeah.
being a teenager is not a mental health diagnosis. It's
Mm-mm.
just it's a stage of development. It can be a very, and often is for people like me, can be a very difficult part of the developmental phase of becoming an adult or
Mm-hmm.
transitioning from childhood to adult.
Yeah.
And a lot of that can be really exacerbated by a lot of external variables, like what kind of families the individual is coming from. That can have
Mm-hmm.
a huge impact on teens as it did for me. I came from a very rurally poor family in the deep South, and my mother was also mentally ill. So,
Mm.
you grow up in a combination of, extreme rural poverty and extreme mental illness within a
Mm-hmm.
dysfunctional family system anyway. And that in and of itself is going to make what is already a very unpleasant experience going through your teenage years that much more difficult. And in my case, I definitely think that was the way you beautifully put it with technology. Is we have this kind of idea of what that developmental process and that kind of evolution of a human being should look like, and we get a lot of these so-called, particularly these days, a lot of these with the advent of the internet and social media and just mass communication in general. You get a lot
Mm-hmm.
of there's a lot of noise out there, and there's a lot of people that I would say don't really know what the fuck they're talking about, but they
Yeah.
because they say it with such conviction and such force, people are like, oh, they
Mm.
must, just because they believe it, that must be how it is. So we kind of
Mm-hmm.
buy into a lot of these ideas on development and what teenage behavior should be and what it shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be. And for my parents, in addition to being very poor and my mother growing up, or me growing up with a very mentally ill mother,
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of in the rural South. There's a lot of kind of doctrine, I would call it. My family were very involved in the church and in the
Mm-hmm.
fundamentalist Christian movement. So that kind of informed a lot of what we were growing up in. So
Mm-hmm.
um, when I started using substances and exploring, alcohol and
Mm.
engaging in sex and all that stuff, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
Christian families where I'm from, they have the very, very similar reaction. They're like, "Oh my God, the devil's got this boy." Yeah, exactly. The devil's got this boy, so we're going to throw holy water on him and pray, and
Yep.
then send him away somewhere. So I
Uh,
started getting in trouble at like a pretty young age because,
mm.
when you're poor, and this was, pre-internet, pre-everything. This was I was born in 1982. So
Mhm.
by the time I started, using and getting into all that stuff, it was the, mid 90s, like
Mhm.
95, 96.
Yeah.
Um, and people just didn't know what they didn't know then. So I started getting in
Mhm.
trouble, and my parents already were not thrilled with me to begin with.
Mm.
And then I started getting in trouble, and because I didn't, fit into the molds and
Mhm.
whatever. Then you throw substances on top of that, and it was just a real kind of mess. And I started getting in trouble, and a variety of things happened. But looking back on it, it was all very manageable, And
Mm.
looking back on it, and having worked in the teen world now for over almost 30 years, I've seen a lot of kids come and go in and out of treatment, and kind of
Mhm.
watch them develop over that time. And you know, teenagers are just kind of assholes. I mean, I don't know a better way of saying it, but if
Yeah.
there's like and unfortunately, being an asshole also isn't a behavioral health diagnosis. It's just kind of like, well, that's kind of how some people are,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and I certainly was not pleasant, I think, is a diplomatic way of
Mm.
saying it. But my parents didn't want much to do with me, and then lo come along a friend of mine who went into this troubled teen treatment program, and he was kind of the like his name was Kenneth. He was kind of the resident screw up of the friend group. I
Mm.
think every friend group has one of those guys that like they're
Yeah.
always getting in trouble. They always get caught.
Yep.
Their parents are always like catching them in the middle of something.
Mhm.
And that was just Kenneth. And he went away to one of these places, and then he came
Mm.
back skipping one day and was telling me about all these attractive young women that he had met in this treatment program. And for a
Uh-oh.
hormonal 15-year-old boy, I was like, you mean there are hot girls there? What do I got to do? How do I show up to this party, right? And looking back on it, it was really kind of a marketing ploy that the treatment centers would utilize a lot. They would, it was like churches would do
Oh.
with outreach. It was like they would have
Mm.
kids go into schools, and they would be like they would, essentially share their testimony, and then
Mhm.
other kids would become very attracted by it. They would go to these youth groups or these youth treatment meetings.
Mhm.
And when I showed up, I grew up in this rural trailer park.
Mhm.
People, we were constantly being made fun of because we didn't dress like everybody else. We didn't have the same clothes as everybody else.
Yeah.
Everybody drove these really nice cars. I drove like a beat up 1984 Nissan Datsun that had been wrapped around a
Ah.
tree. So my uncle had
Ugh.
like banged out the bed, and it had like,
Oh, man.
wooden 2x4s as like a truck bed. And so it was just a ghetto mobile.
Uh-huh.
And and then I rolled up to this church where all these kids were at, and they were driving like, you know, Land Rovers and Mercedes and
Oh.
stuff like that, and just,
Ugh.
cars that were nicer than my parents' cars. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And all
Mm.
these like beautiful young girls and stuff come out, and they're like, oh, we
Mhm.
love you, and they give you a hug. And I was sold. I was like, oh my God, yeah, sure.
Huh.
And then the next thing I knew, I was sitting down with these substance abuse counselors,
Mhm.
and who were like 20 years old at the time. But to a 15-year-old, a 20-year-old is like, God. It's like, oh my God, this person knows everything. They're
Uh-huh.
20, they're no longer a teenager.
Mhm.
And um and they really just kind of put their hooks in me. And because
Mm.
of the family environment that I was in, and my mother was in and out of mental institutions, and she had tried to kill herself on numerous times. And
Mm.
my dad was just kind of a workaholic.
Mm.
And he just didn't want to be around at all, so he kind of
Yeah.
escaped through work and just doing what a lot of men in my part of the country do, is they just put their heads down and don't talk about it, and they just are like, well, we'll just grind through this. And
Yep.
when I got to the treatment program, I was casually using cannabis and drinking on the weekends. And yeah, I was getting in trouble and stuff like that, but so was everybody else that I kind of grew up with. But when I sat
Mhm.
down with these treatment folks, one, they were so attractive to me because the lifestyle was just it was such a juxtaposition to anything
Yeah.
that I had ever seen before. I mean, I never
Mhm.
even went to the parts of town that these people lived in. And then the next thing
Oh,
I know,
wow.
I'm sitting in a living room that's like bigger than the trailer that I live in.
Oh, man.
And these guys are just, they're all wearing nice clothes and telling me they love me and they want to hang out with me and stay at my place. And
Hmm.
where I had grown up before, it was pretty common, and I had gotten used to it at that point,
Mhm.
where people I would make friends, or try to make acquaintances growing up, and it would be all well and good until people found out where I went, where I
Mm.
lived. And what my parents did and stuff. And then it was like, well, Corey can come and stay at our house, but you can never go stay at Corey's house. But here they just did not seem to care. They were like, no, we'll stay at your place. And they were like, oh, you live in a trailer? That's so cool. Nobody ever said like living in a trailer, said no one ever living in a trailer park is cool. But I was just kind of like white trash anomaly. I don't know that they had never seen before. So they were kind of fascinated by me. And I loved it. And then they were talking about substances and a bunch of other stuff. And you know, I really wanted to fit in with these guys. So I you know, started exaggerating and lying, what most teenagers do. And you know, the next thing I knew they were telling me like, man, you're a drug addict and an alcoholic. And the interesting thing wasn't that. The interesting is that they found a very creative way to kind of pin all of my life's problems on my addiction to alcohol and substances at that time. And they were like, yeah, you know, your mom being screwed and your parents and all of that. It reminded me a lot of what you kind of hear in the church a lot of times. It's like, well, if you just get right with God and you just like, you know, accept Jesus, then
everything
like all of your
fixes
problems
itself.
everything just kind of fixes itself. So their version of that, even though it was kind of a secular version of it, and it's consistent across most troubled teen programs, is it's kind of like, look, if you just admit that you're an alcoholic and you have this problem, and by de facto admitting that you're an alcoholic and have this problem, you agree to listen and do with whatever we tell you to do, then like your life will just get better. So for somebody like me, I was like, oh my God, this is, because I hated growing up the way that I did. And I didn't like any of it. I didn't like being abused. I didn't like being poor. I didn't like neglect. Like, I don't know any kid that would like being in that, on top of being, you know, a very broody teenager. So I was like, wait a minute, you guys are telling me if I just come here and hang out with you, then like all of this shit's going to get better. Like where do I sign? What do I have to do? For me, it was kind of a ticket out of the situation that I was in. So, you know, we had all those conversations and stuff. And then the next thing I knew, I was being admitted into this treatment program that was not free. So I still to this day do not know what my parents did or who they stole from or borrowed from or whatever to get me in. But I kind of joke around. I'm convinced there were probably some like wealthy Jewish family in Atlanta that was like, that felt bad for me and was just like, well, you know, it's $8,000, we'll cover it for them. But nonetheless, I made it into that treatment program. And kind of like you were saying with technology, it's like we have this idea of how it's supposed to work. And that's what I had. I was like, oh man, I'm going to use this program. I'm going to hang out with these people and my problems will be fixed. And a funny thing happened as I was there and doing everything that they told me to, but my mom was still, you know, a schizophrenic. My dad was still working 3 jobs. We still lived in the same crappy trailer. I still had all of the same emotional problems that I had before. I still had the same learning disadvantages that I had before. But these folks kept telling me like, look, you have everything that you need. And I noticed the more that I started decomposing, which one would think I started going insane. I mean, I was already probably insane, but I got worse, a lot worse when I was in the treatment center, because a lot of the narrative that they had about you just do these things and stuff gets better, that wasn't happening for me, you know. And it was like really nice stuff if you were an upper middle class white kid from like a privileged family. Yeah, I'm sure if you just stop doing drugs and your parents will go, and kids were getting like new BMWs for literally a guy in my treatment program, his parents, after he got like 30 days clean and got out of outpatient, his parents were like, we're so proud of you. And we bought you this like brand new BMW and everything. And oh yeah. And I got out and my dad was like, yeah, forgive me for saying this, but it was like, so effing what, who gives a crap? Like, you know, big deal. So there were a lot of just incongruencies, and they got very angry about that because it didn't fit their narrative and their paradigm. So the more that I would try and kind of fit that paradigm, the less it would work and the angrier that they would get. And unfortunately, that really fed into a lot of my, shame and just remorse. So I would just kind of throw myself more and more into it. And, and they would come up with these other kind of very creative, you know, ways to narratives, because a lot of this also happened in like any troubled teen program, it would happen in like a group setting. So
Ooh.
unfortunately, you don't necessarily suffer in silence. You're publicly ridiculed
Ugh.
by a group of your peers
Yeah.
and a counselor. So I
Mm.
remember in groups they would kind of break you down and get you talking about stuff, and I'd talk about my mother trying to kill herself, or
Yeah.
telling me that she didn't love me, or
Mm.
whatever the sort of traumatic episode was
Yeah.
growing up. And
Mhm.
the response was always, and it wasn't just me in these groups. There were 10, 12 other people in the outpatient setting with me taking these groups.
Yeah.
And some of them are young women that had been raped, some of them are young
Mm.
women that have been sexually molested by like family members and stuff, like
Mhm.
really traumatic things that happen. And
Yeah.
these counselors, in a variety of creative ways, would basically uh, boil it all down to like, well, this is your fault. Basically, with the women, it
Mm.
was like, oh, well, if you weren't so sexual, or you didn't act like such a whore. This was literally something I heard
Mm.
in a group meeting. It was like, oh, well, if you weren't such a whore and you didn't sleep with all these different guys, then maybe you wouldn't have got raped. Or
The
with
fuck?
in an instance in my case, it was like, well, if you weren't such you know a little dickhead when you were 5, your mom wouldn't have, busted your
Mm.
eye open and locked you out of the house. And it's like, wait a minute,
Ugh.
I was 5 years old. Huh?
Yeah.
So they were quite creative and clever at like kind of breaking you
Mm.
down. And the idea behind it was that the more they could break you down, the more compliant you became. And a lot of
Mm.
time in treatment programs, they're particularly troubled teen treatment
Mm.
programs, which I'm happy to unpack. They're very good at breaking people down into a state of compliance. And for them,
Mm.
that is progress. The more
Mhm.
compliant you are, the
Mhm.
more progress that you make.
Yeah.
So I equate it a lot to a lot of these programs. It's very much like getting someone to shut up by duct taping their mouth closed.
Mm.
It's effective.
Yeah.
It works.
Mhm.
But when you take the tape off, whether it's after 5 years, which was my case, or
Mhm.
30, 60 days, they're probably going to have something to say.
Yeah.
Um, so I had a lot to say, and still do, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
I uh, 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 a lot of that was kind of given to me, or I was indoctrinated with that kind of ideology. And
Mhm.
I managed to stay in that troubled teen program from the time I was 15
Mhm.
until I was 20.
Oh,
And
wow.
during that time, like a lot of other kids that I was in treatment with, which there were thousands
Mhm.
um, across the country, but there were thousands of us. They got us to drop out of school immediately because that was a distraction. So I left
Whoa.
school with a ninth grade education.
What?
You were only allowed to hang out with people in the treatment program. You could only
Mm.
date people in the treatment program. You could only have friends with people in the treatment program. You could only get jobs with people in the treatment program. Uh, that was preferable.
Uh-huh.
And if you did, before you were 18, you had to live with your parents because that was kind of the law.
Mhm.
But you never stayed at your parents' house alone. So you either stayed at somebody else's home with a group member, or they stayed at your home with a group member. So you weren't
Mm.
really allowed to ever spend time alone. And if you did, it had to be for like very specific reasons. And then even then, they would give you like loads of shit about it. If you had to like
Mm.
go away for a weekend because a relative died, say for
Mhm.
instance, they were very, very against that. They were like, no, you need to stay here. And
Uh.
because it could be detrimental to your programming, or it could
Mhm.
trigger you. So they
Mhm.
really wanted to keep you in that bubble, for lack of
Mm.
better words. One,
Yeah.
because it's way more effective for programming. They
Mhm.
call it programming, I call it indoctrination. But
Same thing.
it's essentially what they were doing.
Uh-huh.
Um, but the other reason is, it's just that level of control, and again,
Mhm.
compliance. The more compliant you are, the more they were like, great, you're
Hmm.
doing what needs to be done.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that everybody eventually has to get out of treatment.
Yeah.
Everybody does eventually.
Mhm.
And after 5 years of being there, I really wanted to be a counselor. That was like the creme de la creme in the
Uh-huh.
program.
Mhm.
But when quickly found out that because I did come from the background that I came from, even though they all said they didn't care about, like, no, we don't care about your money or your background or whatever.
Mhm.
it definitely was a barrier to individuals becoming counselors in the treatment program, because
Yep.
their model, they didn't go after poor kids like me. I kind of was an
Mm.
accident that just wound up there.
Mm.
Most of the kids that I was in treatment with, their parents were very, very upper middle class.
Mm.
Like there was a kid that I was in treatment with, his family owned a series of like national restaurant chains that are
Mm.
still prominent today.
Huh.
And before he got to the treatment center, they had spent like $1 million on him in different types of rehab and stuff like that.
Oh,
So they
geez.
really go after like high net worth
Mhm.
families and stuff. So
Mm.
that was kind of another feeling of uh, difference, for lack of a better word, was a lot of these kids. You had a problem and they could just kind of throw money at it, and
Mm.
that was it. And when I had a problem, it was like, well, just get it together, man.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? And I was like, oh, okay. Um,
Oh,
so,
man.
and then one day they just were like, hey, we think it's time for you to leave. And I was like, what are you talking about? And
Mhm.
this was after being there for like 4 years and some change or something like that. And they were like,
Mhm.
yeah, we're going to give you, I think it was like a month, maybe 2 months, where they were
Mm.
like, yeah, we're going to give you a transition time of like 2 months or something like that. And
Hmm.
then, and then you guys are going to be out. And we were like,
Huh.
oh, and it was just a terrifying feeling, because again, I had no
Mhm.
money, no friends other than people in the group.
Mhm.
I had no education. I had no
Yeah.
marketable skills of any kind, because the only jobs you would do were these kind of, you know,
Mhm.
work at a coffee shop or, whatever. So I had no real, even though coffee shops back then weren't even really a thing. It was like a hot
Mhm.
dog stand or a dishwasher
Mhm.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
so I came out with no skills, and then they just sort of dump you into these 12-step meetings, which was like
Mhm.
AA recovery. I was
Mhm.
20 years old at that time, and
Yeah.
everybody in the treatment program was roughly my age when I was there. It was like
Mhm.
between the ages of 12 to like 18, 19, 20. So it was like adolescents and young adults.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I was living with a group of peers at that time who were all my age, and we were all in the group together.
Mhm.
So it was like a bubble, a community, and then all of a sudden one day you're just out. And I was going to AA meetings and stuff at the time, and all of these
Mhm.
guys were at least like 20, 25 years older than me. So
Mhm.
I had no point of reference. The stories that they had about drinking and stuff like that were just,
Mhm.
horrendous. You hear these like just crazy stories about guys living under bridges and
Mhm.
drinking their life savings away and their kids and families away. And I was like, yeah, I drank like a few times in the back of a pickup truck, and I got drunk like I could count the times I got drunk, on both my hands.
Mhm.
But because I was in treatment, they were like, "Oh, well, you're an alcoholic and a drug addict."
Mm.
And I
Hmm.
ended up staying in the recovery world for like 20 something years after that.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, just because I was like, oh well, they said I was, and they also
Mhm.
said like if you ever touch drugs or alcohol, you're gonna die because you're a drug addict, and that'll mean the
Mhm.
death of you. So I was like, oh my
Yeah.
god. So I went insane, quite
Yeah.
literally,
Mhm.
after I got out of that. I mean, I probably wasn't a beacon of sanity to begin with, coming out of that place, and even the
Yeah.
folks in AA and NA were like, "Yo, this kid is spooky. Like, this is weird. Like, what's going on with it?" And it's pretty bad when people in AA are like, "Yo, you're pretty weird." Um, that's not a
Nah.
good sign. So I came out, but all the people in AA, they were alcoholics, and that was their
Mhm.
total identity. So they were like, "Oh, well, you must be an alcoholic too." So I was like, "Okay,
Mhm.
sure, I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict."
Mhm.
And uh, I kind of hung around, and during that time, it was just hell. I mean, I don't know
Mm.
how to. For like 2.5 years, I was very suicidal, like every
Mhm.
day, very suicidal. I
Mm.
wanted to take my life. I was just, I couldn't work. I couldn't function. I kept
Yeah.
having these like massive emotional upheavals and mental
Mm.
breaks.
Mhm.
And finally, after a few years, a doctor that I knew in AA kind of pulled me to the side and was in a very, he really saved my life and became kind of a mentor of mine. He was like,
Mm.
"Look, kid, you're fucking nuts. I don't know a better way of telling you this, but like, you're insane,
Huh.
and like you could really probably do with seeing a therapist and
Hmm.
ideally a psychiatrist." But
Mhm.
in a lot of the behavior modification, a lot of the troubled teen programs, they're very anti psychiatry, anti medication. They have their
Mm.
own dogmas that
Hmm.
they kind of engage in,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
And I came out. So it took me years, even after that, to
Mm.
agree to see a therapist, and then agree to see a, a psychiatrist and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I decided, instead of doing all that, I was just going to leave the country. So by that time, I had kind of started getting into school and stuff like that. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, look, this place is crazy. I can't get away from these people and my family. And I knew that I
Uh-huh.
was just in a bit of a like kind of a crabs in a bucket scenario, where I was like, all
Mhm.
right, I'm in this situation. And no matter how much I keep trying to climb out, I just keep getting pulled back into it. So I need to
Mhm.
just get out of this area
Yep.
in any way that I can. And I was very fortunate. I worked really hard and did, really well in school, which
Uh-huh.
was just something that like kind of naturally came to me.
Oh, yeah.
And well, not naturally, but like I really had to work at it. But it eventually
Yeah,
came to me.
that's
And
good.
I got a big scholarship, and I was able to move to Dublin, Ireland. So as soon as I got that, I was like, peace out. I am getting out of here. And I managed to stay in Europe. I did my bachelor's, and I did 3 master's degrees, and then I did my PhD, all in Europe at uh,
Wow.
European universities and institutions. So, and I was very
Huh.
fortunate to go to like some of the best schools in the world over there. So, um, it was really kind of a blessing. And for me, uh, Europe saved my life in a
Mhm.
odd way, because I needed to kind of get out of the the just indoctrinated world that I was in,
Mhm.
whether
Yeah.
it was AA or the Deep South or kind of all of that. I just, it sounds kind of crazy talking about it this way, but
Eh.
it's the only way I can explain it. As I had a lot of voices in my head that weren't mine, and they were
Mhm.
all telling me what I should do and what I shouldn't do and how I should be.
Yep.
And they were like the counselors from this cult treatment program, or like the
Mhm.
culty people in AA, or my parents, or the church, or whatever. And
Mhm.
I eventually was like, okay, I gotta get out of here. And Europe was kind of refreshing for me, because it's just such a secular place,
Yeah.
that's really kind of void of a lot of that. They kind of had their go with Christianity and all that, and they were like, all
Mhm.
right, whatever. And it's still there, and it's a part of the everyday
Yeah.
life, but it's just not like a doctrine that everybody. It was a lot more secular, and
Mhm.
it was also nice because it kind of took a lot of the shame out of my experience. Because when I would
Mm.
talk to friends of mine about it in Europe, and I went to very good schools, and they were very international environments. So I was there
Yeah.
with like kids from China and Russia and
Mm.
the Middle East, and a lot
Uh-huh.
of Europeans from all over the place.
Yeah.
So I made friends with them, and I would talk to them about my experience, and I'd be like, yeah, I don't drink. And I was in this like weird treatment program, and yeah, it turned
Mhm.
out to be a cult and whatever. And instead of everybody being like, in America, everybody's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that you went through that or whatever. And in
Mhm.
Europe, they were like, oh my God, you're so American. That sounds so American. That would never happen in Europe. It was kind of this like almost novelty story uh, that people didn't seem to care about. And it kind
Huh.
of helped me accept it in an odd way.
Yeah.
So on a subconscious level, I think over there, I just kind of closed that chapter of my life as like, okay, this was just
Huh.
like a weird, very weird, like, you know, 10-year period of my life from like
Mhm.
15 to like 24 or whatever it was.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and I was like, I'm just going to close the book on that, and we're going to forget about that, and we'll just move on. We'll just
Yeah.
pretend like it didn't happen, and we'll just move on. And so, like the rest of my 20s and into my early 30s, I was in Europe.
Uh-huh.
I had moved to London at that time. I was doing my PhD, and I decided to study adolescent. I got really interested in how kids become indoctrinated in a variety
Mm.
of different environments.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
But I was looking at it from a political lens. So I
Hmm.
really got into. Initially, I was going to study law,
Okay.
but then I decided to go into political science and international relations, and
Hmm.
particularly a subset of uh, economics called behavioral economics. I was really interested in
Hmm.
like notions of Nash's equilibrium and human behavior, and how a lot of it's not rational. So I really got into a lot of that stuff,
Uh-huh.
and um, and I started studying terrorism, and I
Uh-huh.
started studying how kids in conflict zones become radicalized. They, end up getting indoctrinated by these narratives that are, either political or social or religious in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And, through that kind of indoctrination process, they end up crossing a line.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was really interested at is like the process which brings them to that point of crossing the line,
Mm-hmm.
and then really looking at a variety of ways where you can kind of bring them back from that precipice and kind of over into a more moderate form or disindoctrinated form of thinking.
Hmm.
And that was what I did my PhD on.
Huh.
And yeah, and then in 2017, I decided to move back to the United States,
Mm-hmm.
and was working in a completely different field. And then decided that I was going. I was working for Rolls-Royce Motor Company at the time. Actually,
Oh,
I was
wow. Huh.
doing marketing and advertising for them with a lot of
That's
their
really,
Beverly Hills and Southern California locations. Yeah,
huh. That's really
um,
cool.
it was. Yeah, yeah. So it was kind of like my. It was like I felt like in the treatment and therapeutic world, we talk a lot about like your inner child and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And I think on a subconscious level, it was me kind of like soothing my inner child,
Mm.
because when I was 16, you all kids where I grew up, you read like automobile magazines and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to drive this one day or drive that one day. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of a dream come true. I was living in Beverly Hills and, going to
Mm-hmm.
all these swanky marketing events and advertising things and like meeting
Uh-huh.
celebrities. And, it was just a very LA lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really feel like I had a whole lot of purpose doing that.
Mm.
And I was like, look, I didn't come from where I came from and do all this education to like basically sell overpriced cars to people with more money than they had sense. So I was like,
Yeah.
I want to do something that kind of makes an impact. And
Yeah.
I met a bunch of recovery people, because at the time I was still, going to meetings and very involved in that
Mm-hmm.
world, which, I have no bones or anything about the AA world. There's
Uh-huh.
some really kooky people and subsets in that world.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of really good people that like
Yeah.
really, really are in my life today. I will love them forever. They saved my
Mm-hmm.
life. So
Yeah.
I will be forever grateful to those people for that. But in Los Angeles, there's kind of like 2 degrees of separation between the AA world and like
Mm.
the treatment recovery world.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody works in rehab, in
Yeah.
recovery, and
Huh.
I because I closed that chapter of my life and
Mm-hmm.
decided that we're just going to forget about that. I was like, I'm never going to go work for a treatment company, because another
Mm.
idea that I had was like, they don't make any money.
Yeah.
Like, because I knew the counselors in those programs, and I was like, those guys were broke all the time. Like, and I've spent my life being broke. I want to, make money.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the guys that I was meeting in the recovery world here in meetings, they all were driving like Bentleys and Rolls Royces and Range
Mm.
Rovers. And I was like, what the hell do you guys do? And they're like, oh, I own a treatment program, or I
Hmm.
own a men's sober living, or I own a women's sober living,
Mm-hmm.
or I do this or that. And I was like, oh my God.
Huh.
And you can afford to drive these cars? And they were like, oh yeah, man,
Huh.
the money. And they were talking about this and that. And they were like, and we get to help people. And it really kind of fed in within AA and
Uh-huh.
NA and a lot of the like 12-step and treatment doctrines. There is this idea, I call it the mythology of like the good life.
Mm.
It's like, if you do what people tell you to do, if you work the steps the way they tell you to,
Yep.
it's kind of like technology. If you follow this formula,
Uh-huh.
then these things will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that, it's like in the Christian theology, I call it and it's known as the prosperity doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different ways of interpreting the Bible, and part of that interpretation is like, if you stay close to God and perform His will well, then you'll be rewarded with riches here and
Mm-hmm.
in the afterlife. But most importantly, here,
Yeah.
and which I don't think that's how the theology started out, but that
No.
seems to be where it went.
Yeah.
And it's very much the same in the like 12-step and recovery world. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you can tell if you're doing good because you're making it.
Mm-hmm.
And the treatment world really, really buys into that.
Mm.
So these guys were making it, and I was like, well, I
Yeah.
want a little piece of that. And I naively kind of thought like, yeah, we'll change lives and make a lot of money doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I started going into the field with that kind of intention.
Mm-hmm.
And then I quickly learned that
Same
there was
thing.
something very different going on.
Mm.
And that was really what kind of inspired the idea and the premise for my book, which is Selling Sanity, which anyone, if they're seeing this, they can see it behind me. But it also started a big journey for me on working in the recovery world, having been someone that went through the troubled teen industry and then kind of came out of it, left it, and then oddly enough went back into the treatment world. It was very educational seeing it from a different side, because I just saw it from the side of a patient. And you know, when you're a dumb 15-year-old, you don't know anything. I didn't know anything. Also, I had a 9th grade education. I was completely ignorant. And coming out of that and having had a lot of education and a lot of different things, it was interesting working in that field and seeing it from a different lens and seeing how the business of recovery was really sold to people and marketed to people. And a lot of the stuff that I just kind of accepted because of being in treatment and in AA and all of this stuff as, for lack of a better word, gospel, despite having educated myself and all of this stuff, there were a lot of things that I just took for as like, this is doctrine and this is how it is, you know. And then being in the recovery world, it really started to, I started becoming very disillusioned because I started seeing how the sausage was made, for lack of better words, behind the scenes. And little by little, I started connecting dots from when I was in treatment and what was told to me and what I was seeing happen to other people. And it sounds very strange, but I kind of had this almost like a moment of clarity where I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, you're
this
Eureka.
is all bullshit. Yeah, I was like, oh my God. These people are all full of shit. They have no idea what they're talking about. And then I started applying that to myself and the distinction that I make in Selling Sanity, because I'm not anti-AA or anti-12 steps, and I'm definitely not anti-treatment or therapy. I make a distinction between the industry side of things, which is what I was a victim of and a lot of people become a victim of. And then there's a professional side of the treatment world, which those people do God's work. You know, they're people that work at places like the VA or, you know, like LA County Department of Mental Health or whatever city or state that you live in, that work for those types of facilities. They're doing God's work. And that's like, it's very evidence-based. It lacks a lot of doctrine and stuff like that. It's just very like, there's a scientific underpinning to it that is void of any kind of like doctrine, for lack of a better word. And there are like very clear levels of certification and stuff. But on the industry side, a lot of what is pawned off as and sold to people as like sanity, treatment, for lack of better words, treatment, and like, oh, this is therapy and this is what you do. And this is, I would say like 80% of it is not grounded in anything scientific. A lot of it most of it on the substance abuse side comes from the 12-step movement, which is great. Again, it like works for a certain population of individuals and it's effective, but there's no scientific evidence to support AA. There have never been any like long-term longitudinal studies done on the efficacy of Alcoholics Anonymous or anything like that. So there's not like a whole lot of data to really support the science. And if you look at the overall outcome measures of programs like Alcoholics Anonymous and stuff, it's like 1 in 40 people get sober and stay sober. So, you know, I would never go see a doctor that had a 1 in 40 success rate. You know what I mean? If it was like, 39 out of every 40 people die when I operate on them, I'd be like, I'm not gonna go see you, dude. I need a different doctor. I'm going to definitely go for a second opinion. But unfortunately, and then a lot of these treatment programs, they really have the same kind of outcomes measures. They'll beef it up with a bunch of different stuff, but it's a little bit better than, you know, AA. Maybe it's like a 10 to 20% success rate, depending on what program and how you do it. But maybe at best you'll get like a 40% success rate. But again, still, that's like, okay, 6 out of the 10 people I operate on die. That's still not like, great. It's still not great. Even at 50-50, I'd be like, you know,
Yeah.
depending on how bad it was. So
Mm-hmm.
you working in the field and kind of seeing the how the business side of it works, both from like a
Mm-hmm.
unit economic side to like a more systemic macro side,
Mm-hmm.
as well as really getting to know a lot of the characters in the field. Like
Mm-hmm.
80% of the and when I talk about this long rant that I've been on, this when I talk about the troubled teen industry,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very specific subset of the overall treatment world. Now, I would
Mm.
say in the overall treatment world, about on the commercial side, 80% of it is just, you know,
Garbage.
I don't want to go as far as to say it's garbage, but it's like, I would say it's in that like
Take it with a grain of
40
salt.
40 percentile thing of like the success rates and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of it is because behavioral healthcare as an industry and as a whole is a relatively new discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Addiction studies and stuff like that. There's a lot of room for growth and for science to come in and really start looking
Mm-hmm.
into it, which they're doing and making like great strides now. There's a lot of really cool like research and studies that are be doing that are really promising
Yeah.
right now. But still, as a whole, the like commercial profession is, I would say it falls within 80% of it falls within that like 40%
Hmm.
kind of success rate field. But then there are these troubled teen industries,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just like a whole different ball game. They're most of them
Mm.
are completely private, so they only take commercial insurance. Most of them still are cash pay based.
Mm.
And they say a lot, the ones that's funny on the treatment side, because these people aren't stupid. I mean, they're stupid, but they're not dumb, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
So they know
Yeah,
how
yeah, yeah.
to market, and they'll say like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, well, we don't want to deal with insurance because they will constrain us on what we can and
Yep.
can't do."
Mm-hmm.
So for anybody that's looking for treatment, that is red flag number one. Is like,
Ooh.
"Oh no, we don't want to deal with insurance companies because
Mm-hmm.
it's a thing." Really, what they're saying there is they don't want to fall under the regulatory scope of
Mm.
and everything that goes on a private insurance company
Yeah.
thing. Two, a lot of the reasons that they will only take cash and they won't take commercial insurance is because commercial insurance simply will not pay for most of the stuff that they do, because commercial insurance will only pay for practices that are deemed evidence based.
Mm.
So most of the stuff that they're doing at like these particularly wilderness programs or programs like
Mm-hmm.
Insight that I went through, there's not a whole lot of evidence based grounding in it. A lot of them have
Mm-hmm.
come in with like, they'll do certain types of like skills based therapy or maybe some like psychodynamic elements or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not really evidence based. A lot of it is a lot of that compliance stuff. A lot of it is to kind of break you down and put you in situations where you're just
Mm-hmm.
unable to kind of tend for yourself and you have to rely on somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And they typically are like long term, but most of
Mm.
them kind of promise these like magical results in these condensed periods of time. So that's
Mm.
kind of red flag number two. Any program that's like, we can fix your kid in this 30, 60, or 90 or 6 month program,
Mm-hmm.
that is like, you know, run as fast as you can, because
Yeah.
they cannot. Mental health and behavioral health treatment is not something that you can kind of microwave yourself in of and out of. It's
Yeah,
like,
no.
that is like, it's like starting to go to the gym when you're just really unhealthy. Now, there
Mm-hmm.
are certain things that you can do immediately to like stave off the unhealthiness, like
Mm-hmm.
changing your diet or eating different, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe if it's extreme, you have to have some surgery or you have to get put on some medication or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, the road to wellness is a lot of just, it's boring. It's like, it's we all want like sexy solutions and answers, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of just really boring shit day in and day out. It's a
Yeah.
lot of what we call is like mental health care. It's really just like mental health hygiene. It's kind of like brushing your
Yeah.
teeth. You If you stop doing it, it's like, oh, I don't really know what's going on. But a prolonged period of not doing it, and you're going to have some problems. And
Mm-hmm.
just because you start doing it again doesn't mean those problems are going to go away. It may mean that you have to fix some things. It could
Mm-hmm.
mean your teeth are just completely screwed and you have to get teeth pulled or fake ones put in, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
when families or individuals are talking about stuff like that, it's it's usually hygiene. And with like kids, the problem that I have is kind of what we just started this conversation on, is like
Mhm.
uh, the teenage years are very difficult to begin with. And
Mhm.
it's really destructive and very damaging to give lifelong, because something like uh, even things like depression or ADHD or anxiety or,
Mhm.
whatever. Yes, of course, people have them, and they can have ADHD tendencies, and you can
Mhm.
have depressive episodes, and you can
Mhm.
have, you can even have like borderline psychotic episodes.
Mhm.
But when you're a child or a teenager developing, uh, they're just that. They're
Yeah.
episodes.
Yeah.
So it's very dangerous and very destructive to give someone a lifelong diagnosis
Mhm.
when it could very well be just like an episode. And just because it's an episode doesn't mean that it's just going to last like a week or 2 weeks
Mhm.
or a year. Even it could be like a couple years,
Yeah.
because a lot of it is just developmental, and there are neurochemically, there's so much going on in your body. Your
Mhm.
physiology is constantly changing. Your endocrine and hormone systems are always in like shifts.
Yeah.
uh, so it's kind of like this because that's what your body's doing. And in a
Mhm.
lot of ways, your system, like chemically and neurochemically, is just kind of like, whoa, what's going on
Mhm.
right now? Because it's just
Yeah.
constantly being bombarded with like stimuli, hormones, chemicals, you name it.
Mhm.
And then in the world that we live in today, um, part of the developmental process with kids is you start to like, you go from this naive sort of preteen where it's
Mhm.
like mommy and daddy are God and everything they say is true, and this
Yep.
goes on and that goes on, to like the teenage years where you're like, well, wait a minute,
Yeah.
like these people don't know what they're doing in the world. All these
Uh-huh.
ideas that you have, they just don't start making, there's a lot of incongruency, and you start to
Mhm.
have to, most of what the teenage years are is you reconcile your ideas with reality as they are.
Mm.
And good therapy is really just, and good teen treatment or any kind of treatment really just helps us to kind of reconcile our notions of our ideas of what the world is to some reconciliation with what reality of the world actually is. And the reality of the
Yeah.
world is that, stuff happens, you get mad, you get sad, people die, people get angry, people do stupid things, you do
Mhm.
stupid things. It's a very messy, non-linear process.
Mhm.
But because in like teen treatment and these ideas, we really like to map things out in a very linear process. And we're like,
Mhm.
oh, this is this and this is that and whatever. So you get all these like experts that are coming out on like, this is what it's like to be a teenager, or this is what it's
Uh-huh.
like there. And I can tell you, as a teen, or the hundreds of teens that I've worked with and talked to, the first thing a teenager is going to say when you talk to them about any of these paradigms or theories is they're going to be like, yeah, but I'm different because.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah.
And then it becomes an argument. And then what most of these programs and what we call therapy, or working with kids, is just essentially an argument between you being like, no, you're not different, and then this kid being like, no, but I am different.
Mhm. Yeah.
and and most adults or therapists or whoever really get frustrated when they can't win the argument, you
Mhm.
know because
Yeah.
teens are very good at being like, and you're supposed to do that. It's like
Mhm.
part of the identity formation process is,
Mm.
you're kind of planting a flag in the ground and being like, this is who I am.
Mhm.
And it doesn't help that process when you have a bunch of adults gaslighting you around you, being like, no, you're not, you're this, or no, you're not, you're that.
Yep.
And the reality may be you very well may be this or that or whatever, but that is
Mhm.
nobody else can tell you who you are. That's something
Mhm.
that you as an individual have to come to on your own.
Yeah.
And good therapy, good treatment, good psychiatry, good care is really just facilitating people on that journey so that they can kind of come back to like, oh, this is who I am.
Yep.
And really that's been my journey, in a very messy way. That's been everybody else's journey.
Uh-huh.
And I really wrote my book and Selling Sanity to talk about that. One, from a male perspective, because so many of these discussions are from the female perspective, and
Mm.
men suffer so much from
Mhm.
behavioral health disorders and
Yeah.
shame and guilt and remorse.
Mhm.
And particularly these days, I don't want to get on the like
Yeah.
violin thing, but it's
Hmm.
very hard to be a male in this environment, in this
Hmm.
world that we live in today.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to be a teenage male in this environment,
Hmm.
in this world that we're living in today. Uh,
Yeah.
and that doesn't mean that it's very easy to pathologize that kind of stuff and turn like being a guy into a pathology of itself, or being a teenager as a pathology of it itself. And I
Hmm.
just fundamentally disagree with that. And I think that telling men's stories and hearing other people share their stories and experiences is so
Hmm.
important, because that's who it was, other men and women, but like other men
Hmm.
that talked about their really messy and kind of screwed up past. And I was like, oh, thank God it's just not me. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like I'm not
Yeah.
the only one. I'm not the
Yep.
only one that feels that way, or I'm not the only one that's been that angry or that alone or that
Hmm.
depressed or that suicidal or whatever. And
Yeah.
there's a component with like men, and particularly men in any kind of treatment or mental health environment, where
Hmm.
there's so much shame uh, that is piled on. And
Hmm.
then it's like, and then you're supposed to turn into this like almost, I don't know, like asexual individual. And
Yeah.
like real manhood is you're supposed to be this like asexual human being that just like feels good all the time and has compassion for this and that and whatever. And it's like,
Uh-huh.
that's ridiculous. That's so ridiculous. There are some days where like I want to kick my dog. I don't,
Hmm.
but like there are some days where I'm like, God damn you, what did you do?
Uh-huh.
And then there are other days where I'm just like, well, life's pretty good and whatever.
Hmm.
And I think it's so important for narrative and storytelling for people to just hear that and to realize that like we're all struggling, and
Hmm.
we're all in this crazy thing together. And for me it was very important to give the a male side of the story for that. And also in selling Sanity, I really wanted to uh, not make it about me, because if there's
Hmm.
anything I've learned on this journey and in this life is it's not about me at all.
Uh-huh.
Is really connect that to a bigger story.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on in the troubled tea industry. So if there's like a little bit of what I say can just shed some light on what's going on and educate families on, not necessarily not sending your kids to treatment, because I think
Hmm.
there are some cases where people do need to go to treatment.
Yeah.
But just, I tell everybody, like, if you're going to send your kid to treatment, you should look into a treatment center the way that you would look into a college or university for your child,
Hmm.
because it's going to have way more of an impact
Hmm.
and than any school or university ever will,
Hmm.
because it's really going to do a lot around like identity formation, either in a positive way or in a very negative way.
Hmm.
So a lot of what my book and what my advocacy and general work is just educating families and showing them what to look out for, that
Uh-huh.
are like red flags and things to run away from,
Hmm.
but then also what to look for. What is good therapy? What is good treatment? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And not just from a like anecdotal standpoint of like, oh well, this was my experience and that must make it so. There's nothing
Hmm.
scientific or evidence based about anecdotal life experience. It's helpful in a way, but
Hmm.
there's nothing inherently empirical about it.
Hmm.
So really trying to attach my life experience and unpack that into a more empirical narrative.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I love that kind of thing because it's really highlighting that there's a much bigger issue going on, and it really does take all of us contributing a little bit to help tackle it, because not one person can do it on their own. And if they could have, you would have already done it while you were in the program, I'm sure.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I noticed even in the treatment industry, and this was a big impetus for my book and just the work
Hmm.
that I do generally, is there were a lot of people in the treatment industry that really disregard all of these survivor stories and these
Hmm.
narratives that are coming out. And it's something I've noticed a lot, and it's very easy to do in the treatment world, because you're
Hmm.
dealing with people that come in with problems. I had
Hmm.
problems. A
Yep.
lot of nobody gets into those programs without having some kind of problem.
Hmm.
So it becomes very easy when those people get kicked out of the treatment program, or the treatment
Hmm.
doesn't work or
Yep.
whatever. These programs don't take any personal responsibility for it. It's very
Mm-mm.
easy to just be like, oh, well, it's because he's crazy, or he's a troubled teen, or
Uh-huh.
he just can't get with the program, or he's
Yep.
not willing, or,
Yep.
whatever, which is infuriating,
Hmm.
because it's like, okay, well, if you guys are operating out of a like 1 in 40 success rate, or
Mhm.
a 50, even a 50-50 success rate,
Mhm.
don't you think it would behoove you to take a look at the process and the things that
Mhm.
you're doing? Maybe it's not just the kid. Yeah, of
Uh-huh.
course. Like, folks like Paris Hilton, who I have the utmost respect for, and I know people that were in treatment with her, and
Mhm.
folks like me, and the countless of other folks that have written. I know most of these people, and I know their stories, and I know people that were in treatment with them and
Mhm.
were there. And yes, they were troubled kids. Yes, they probably were a pain in the ass. I know I was when I was in treatment,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that they were crazy, or that the
Mhm.
things that happened to them weren't wrong,
Yeah.
or that those people didn't make massive mistakes in there. And unfortunately, I think it's a byproduct, and it's something that really ends up harming people, because in these treatment programs, they're just like, oh well, it's not us, it's this person.
Yeah.
And most of these treatment programs aren't run or owned or even designed by people that have any clinical license whatsoever.
Hmm.
80% of them are owned by people that are just business people, or people that like, went through recovery or went through treatment
Hmm.
themselves, and were like, oh, they found out they could make money off of it, so they were like, oh, I'm going to start a treatment center.
Oh,
And then
damn.
in the treatment world, from like a regulatory landscape, if you and I wanted to open a treatment center in
Mhm.
California, all we would need is like $100,000, and we could open a treatment center and get
Huh.
going. And
Wow.
the profit margins on those treatment centers are about 30 to 50% profit on investment. So that's why
Damn.
people are dumping money in them. So you get these
Hmm.
like business guys, or just people, whoever, that are like,
Mhm.
oh, I want to open a treatment center. And then they open a treatment center. And then
Mhm.
most of the clinicians that are in those treatment centers, they're
Mhm.
not even licensed clinicians. They're like associates, which is like the equivalent of an intern resident at a hospital.
Oh, no.
And then, unlike a hospital, it's not like the doctors are right there supervising them. They're, online somewhere, and
Mhm.
they check in with them like once or twice a week to like
Yeah.
pop in. And they're also
Mhm.
supervising like 50 or 60 other treatment programs. So
Yep.
it's very flimsy, and like the
Mm.
rigor and the quality of the staff and the individuals that are in there
Mhm.
are very, it's, questionable at best. But they speak with great conviction. A lot of these
Mhm.
places have made a lot of money, and they have good marketing and branding, so they come
Yeah.
off as like experts, and
Yeah.
maybe they do a TEDx talk somewhere, or maybe they go
Oh,
on
no.
like, a podcast or something like that. And because they
Uh-huh.
know they have the gift of gab or whatever, people
Mhm.
are like, oh, this person must really know what they're talking about. and
Mhm.
and they say they're an expert on treatment, so they must be an expert on treatment, and I'm going to listen to
Mm.
whatever they say. And
Mm.
I'm here to tell people, like, question them,
Yeah.
rigorously question them, question me. I mean, I'm a triple master's PhD, but I'm not a clinician. I'm not a
Uh-huh.
therapist. I tell people that, regularly. So I
Mhm.
I cannot and will not give you advice on therapy, but I can put you in touch with some very smart people that are therapists and legitimate,
Mhm.
that can give you advice.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the mission of you know what I'm doing here, and just my way of helping people retrieve and maintain their sanity.
Hmm. I love that. It's a really important mission because it's one of those, if we continue to let that kind of thing go and run rampant, then it's just going to cause more harm than do good. And it's just going to essentially be another Ouroboros that we got to deal with eventually, you know.
Totally.
So
Yeah, I mean, something I love telling guests and stuff. It's just kind of interesting, fun facts. But in the United States, this gives you just an idea of what that industry is like. In
mhm.
the United States, we spend about $4 trillion a year, depending on who you ask and what data you're looking at. It's like between
Mhm.
4 and 5 trillion a year is the size of the U.S. healthcare economy, is what we spend on healthcare in a year.
Mhm.
Um, what of that $4 or $5 trillion, take it, behavioral health and addiction treatment only accounts for between 3 and 5% of that total spending.
What?
But it only accounts for 3 to 5% of the total spending. But that small little 3 to 5% section of of the healthcare industry accounts for almost, depending on who you look at, and but it's roughly about 20% of all healthcare fraud
Whoa.
comes
That's
from this one little section.
that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Oh man, whenever a small percentage is actually the larger percentage, that is not good. Oof.
Yeah. And a lot of it is just because of lack of regulation, lack of standardization.
Mhm.
Some of it's because, it's a relatively new industry and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But, a lot of it is just because of the lobbying on behalf of a lot of these treatment programs, and then just
Yeah.
kind of the deregulated nature of
Mhm.
the US healthcare system in general.
Yeah.
It makes it very easy for these types of individuals to kind of thrive because
Mhm.
even if you and I say, and this happens all the time, say you and I do decide to open a treatment center in California, we get $100,000, we're going, we're
Mhm.
ripping and roaring, and then the state comes in and is like, "Oh my God, you guys are like scamming insurance companies, you're body brokering, which is like paying kids to come into treatment and then
Mm.
paying them to relapse so they'll stay in treatment," which happens all the time. Oh, it's
What?
grotesque. It's terrible. Oh yeah, they pay for flights and stuff like that. Oh yeah, all these people care about is how much money you have or what kind of insurance you have. And if you
Mm.
have really good insurance, if they run that insurance policy and they see that it's like a banger, as they call it,
Mhm.
and they know exactly how much money they're going to get from you a day, they
Mhm.
will waive everything. And not only will they waive everything, they will pay for you to come to treatment. Oh yeah,
Wow.
they'll waive your deductible, they'll buy your plane tickets, all of that stuff. And it's not because they care about you or because they think
Yeah.
they can help you. It's because they know what they're going to make off of that insurance policy. Same with
Mm.
cash. And like, and
Huh.
they get very flexible on like what they will and won't treat and stuff. So
Uh-huh.
like, it's completely crazy. But say that we
Hmm.
did that, started a treatment center in California, and then the state caught up with us, which it happens all the time.
Yeah.
They do after a couple of years, and they'll be like, "Look, you can't. We're going to close this place down. You can't
Mhm.
do that here."
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Me and you, we just take the money that we earned, and we go to Texas, and we'd be like, "All right, we're going to open up a treatment center in Texas." And there, it's
Same
like
thing.
10 times easier than it is in California.
Oh,
Keep doing
geez.
the same thing. And then eventually, when we get caught again, they'll
Mhm.
fine us or, do whatever. And then we just
Mm.
say, oh, well, you know what? Let's move to Georgia or Oklahoma or
Uh-huh.
Tennessee or whatever the next state is. And they
Huh.
just like go and go and go. And there's no repercussions for them to like start up a treatment center or do anything. It really is an idea of like, oh, well, the market will take care of it. The
Mm.
market will take care of it. And it's like the market is not taking care of it because all the crooks are in cahoots with each other and nobody
Yeah.
wants to upset anybody else because they're all making
Mm.
money.
Yeah.
So it's just bananas.
Yeah, it's kind of feeding off that whole idea that you can't sell actual healing because it's not sexy in itself. Because
Yeah, exactly.
it's actually hard as hell to do any proper healing in a sense, and you're never really fully healed, I think. I think it's a continuous journey of
Totally.
like reclaiming yourself, refinding yourself, remaking yourself, whatever it is. I think it's an everyday process kind of thing. And whenever we sit here and we go, "Oh, well, we can fix it." Well, you just gave me a timeline, and I'm sorry, but that timeline doesn't necessarily actually work in real life because their time is just a construct, anyways. It's just more bullshit that we were indoctrinated with.
Yeah. Well, and like everybody's development is different. It's
Hmm.
like everybody has a different approach to learning.
Yep.
Everybody has a different approach to like emotional maturity to
Hmm.
and that is why things like therapy and developmental psychology and forensic psychology and
Hmm.
psychiatry and stuff like that exists is because they're not perfect, but
Yeah.
a they at least have a decent framework on how
Hmm.
to uh, structure that. And and you said it beautifully. It's not sexy at all, and it's not like a linear thing. And the other like frustrating thing is that we act like we don't know what to do with it all the
Hmm.
time. It's
Yeah.
like, oh well, we don't know what to do, and that's where a lot of these like alternative treatment programs kind of come
Hmm.
up with stuff. Is they're like,
Yeah.
oh, but we came up with this new thing, and it's really
Mm.
great. And the reality is, it's like community-based mental health methods. We already know that they work.
Hmm.
We just don't like to fund them because they're expensive and they're time consuming.
Yeah.
So like what there I could list off at least 20 or 30 organizations in Los Angeles that are funded through the LA County Department of Mental Health,
Mm.
and they work.
Yeah.
They're expensive,
Hmm.
they're labor intensive, but they're
Yeah.
very effective. And these
Hmm.
people are working with the poorest, most disenfranchised
Hmm.
individuals in the country. But it works. It
Yeah.
works really, really well.
Mhm.
The VA, for instance, I mean, in my opinion, the VA is like the gold standard for behavioral health care.
Hmm.
The problem with the VA, because it's all evidence based, they're amazingly trained.
Mhm.
They have like fail safe after fail safe to, but the structures in the VA are expensive. So,
Yeah.
and the only problems with those programs is that we don't want to spend the money on them.
Yeah.
So we keep kind of doing this ridiculous
Mhm.
uh, approach because the private sector and healthcare in America is like, we can do it and we can make a lot of money off of it too.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
don't invest in things like the VA or local like county or state behavioral health organizations because
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know
Uh,
they're not like these profitable organizations that you kind of make a ton of money off of.
yeah. I think it has to go with the fact that it's not very profitable. It's not very easy to market. And it kind of goes along with like, if we fix them, then we can't make more money off of them. And there's also that premise that kind of goes along with, well, they're not worth it if they're mentally ill, because obviously they were morally corrupt in the first place. So they're not worth
Totally.
saving. And I think that that's kind of the mindset that a lot of people have. And that's why trying to break the stigma of mental health is the way to go in some regards, because if we can get the person that thinks that mental illness is not actually an illness, but just like maybe make it to where they can go, oh, they're having a mental health episode, or they can be like, oh, I remember the day that I had a breakdown because I got fired and had grandma die and my dog got ran over in the same day. Maybe they can be like, oh, I can see where some people would snap, quote unquote, and so on and so
Yeah.
forth, because that's what it took for me to get out of addiction, really, was to be like, oh, I'm not the only alcoholic in the world. Damn. But
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
there's like a whole lot of things that kind of went on with my recovery, and it's really interesting because I would love to like draw a lot of either parallels or juxtapositions to see like where different things kind of line up, how our experiences were. It's weird because they were like, they're similar-ish, right? Because we both grew up. You're, I think, 10 years older than me. Not trying to age you or anything, but just saying you were
I'm
born
40.
in the,
I'm 43.
yeah,
Proudly.
33. So there we go.
What?
Yeah. But that's the thing, is that like you went to a like treatment of program kind of thing, right? And I wasn't necessarily troubled youth per se. Well, I definitely was. I mean, wouldn't wind up an alcoholic otherwise. But that was the thing, right? That I was in Boy Scouts most of my adolescence and teen years and stuff. And it was great. It did wonders until I didn't have it anymore. That's whenever my
Yeah.
bubble kind of broke and stuff. And that's whenever it was like, oh, I didn't realize that the things I was actually doing in scouting and that community and stuff like that was actually helping keep me sober from the things that was trying to drag me down in the first place. It's my
Yeah.
whole story is really weird because once I stopped doing those things, that's whenever the addiction like was like, "Hey bud, we're here. You can't run from us now." And it's like, "Fuck." So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think you said it beautifully with it's a sense of belonging. And I think
mhm.
as much as, um, we all, particularly in America, humans love to, we're individuals and we do this and we do that and, whatever. But, our biology and evolution has not advanced that
Mm-mm.
much. And at the end of the day, we are a pack animal.
Mhm.
And we do think we're tribalistic by nature. And
Yeah.
that sense of community is
Mhm.
so important for us. So I've heard that kind of experience from so many different people. I mean, for mine, it was sort of similar with like the family and
Mhm.
my mother getting cancer and getting mentally ill, so having that like family bubble bust.
Mhm.
For a lot of others, it's I work a lot with like folks in the military, veterans and stuff, because they
Mhm.
tend to they
Yeah.
go through a lot. and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
even though my experience is very different than theirs, I can really relate with a lot of the trauma and PTSD
Mhm.
that they experience.
Yeah.
And that sense of community, getting out of the military, for a lot of people, that's a
Mhm.
very disruptive process.
Yep.
And I don't think we do I think human beings in general, we're not the best at transitions, period. Like we
Mm-mm.
talk about it a lot, but like we're such creatures of habit, and
Yeah.
we're so kind of again tribalistic and ritualistic in that
Hmm.
respect, that when that thing gets altered, we kind of are like, oh my god, we don't know what to do. And
Hmm.
it creates a bit of a mental challenge where we have to start
Hmm.
figuring out, like, okay, how do we relate and make sense of
Hmm.
the world? And for some people, substances are a great social lubricant in that process, and
Yep.
then other people, they do it with a variety of different things. So
Yeah.
I completely relate to you.
Yeah. And that's the hard thing though, right? Is to be able to kind of not necessarily admit, but more or less allow oneself to feel the full experience. You know what I mean? To where we don't judge ourselves. We don't sit there and we don't label ourselves to a point. We can look back and we can say, this is what happened and it sucked, but I can at least learn from it. And that's kind of the thing, is that I think whenever we have that bubble burst, whenever we have that culture shock, if you will, is essentially a loss of identity in a sense. And a lot of the time
Absolutely.
we're trying to find our identity again, and that can bring about a whole sense of, well, just restructure of everything, because like you said, we're creatures of habit and familiarity and tribalistic, and that's the thing, is that all those things are what build our foundation of who we are as the individual. Like if you take an American out of the USA and you place them just somewhere over in like Eastern Europe, they're probably going to be like, I don't know what language I'm speaking and I feel weird,
Yeah.
even though everyone kind of looks like me, you know? And
Totally.
it's kind of the same thing. Like we're going to have to learn these different things. And you're right, the transition is one of those things that we can look forward to it, but it's kind of like getting on a roller coaster, like you're strapped in and you're going up and you're like, ah, fuck, never mind, change my mind, change my mind. And then a lot of us, kind of like you said at the very beginning, we cross that line at some point, right, for ourselves. But a lot of the time we're kind of pushed over that line, I think. And
Oh, absolutely.
that's where it's really scary, because we didn't necessarily ask for a lot of the things that happen to us, but we're the ones that have to sit there and pick up the mess. And whenever we're sitting there trying to let people know, like, hey, this is what's going on in my headspace and all that, and we're told that that's wrong, it's like, oof, okay, never mind. I don't know what to think. Because
Yeah.
whenever you first said that you had all these different people's voices in your head trying to tell you what to do and stuff, I was like, wait a minute, hold up. So a few months ago, I had done like a little bit of a thought experiment with myself, because you know how it's like some people don't have that inner monologue, which to me is wild. Like, how do you not have
Totally.
thoughts? It's just like, this doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. But I took it a little bit further, and to the point to where it was like, okay, so whenever I ask myself a question, what's the actual process? Like, I'd really try to listen. And we always talk about having trains in our heads go like back and forth sideways, or if you have ADHD or whatever, it's like you have 8 of them going all the time. Somehow the trains are crisscrossing and dodging each other by like millimeters, and all the conductors are yelling and screaming, right? But oh crap. Hang on. Let me my brain oh, the train. Anyway, so whenever the train of thought is going along, I'll ask I'll shout out the question, and the question goes through the train cars, and then the passengers start like raising their hand trying to go like, "Ooh, I know the answer. Ooh, I know the answer." And it's like, "Wait a minute, what the hell's going on?" And I think I figured out what it is. It's those little tiny programs, those little tiny indoctrinations that I've grown up with throughout the years, trying to tell me which way to go to fit in, so that I'm not rejected, so that I'm not alone, so that I fit in, because everyone else knows what to do. I never did. And it took a long way and a whole lot of shit to figure out that not really anyone knows what's actually going on. We're all kind of winging
No.
it. So,
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think that was a big revelation for me, is like we're all just kind of blagging it as we go along. And I really discovered that in the professional world, because
mhm,
I used to think everybody had it together and this and that. And I was like, oh my God, like I call it the 90-10 rule. It's like
Mm,
90% of the things in the world I have no control over and can do nothing about.
mhm.
But the little 10% that I can,
Yeah.
I only have about 50-50 control over the rest of that 10%. You know what I mean? So
Uh-huh.
it's kind of like a lot of that's just up to chance, if that makes kind of any sense whatsoever. So
Mhm.
we all just, there's a beautiful Ram Dass quote. I was talking to my fiance about it last
Mhm.
night. It's, we're all just walking each other home at the end of the day,
Oh.
and I think that's so true. And, some of us are lost as fuck on that journey home, and some of us have
Mhm.
kind of an idea of where we're going, but for the most part we're all just like walking in a direction and hoping. And
Mhm.
and I think that's like it's allowed me to take a lot of pressure off of myself.
Mm.
um and I love what you said about all the about the thought experiment with the train. I mean, mine is, I just realized that there were a bunch of ideas and notions that I was carrying around or that I had adopted that weren't even mine. And I
Mm.
was like, oh, wait a minute. Do I even believe this? Do I even like, is this, is this true? It's that kind of
Mhm.
Katie Byron exercise on just like questioning thoughts.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, is this thought true? Do I know it's true?
Mhm.
Wow, what would life be like if this wasn't true?
Yeah.
Um, and those types of things are so important and so impactful. But uh, it's all everybody's individual journey. And like you're
Mhm.
saying, we're all on the same roller coaster, but we're all having a very different experience of what that's like. Because some people may really love roller coasters.
Uh-huh.
Some people may be like me, who have bad vertigo, and it's like, oh god,
Uh-huh.
I hate this, it sucks. But like,
Uh-huh.
we're all on the roller coaster together.
Mhm.
So it's just about learning how to really integrate and acclimate to enjoying the experience as best we can.
I love that. And yeah, we're all on the same ride. And I definitely know some people are sitting behind the people that are throwing up in front. So that definitely sucks.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that's the
That's a
thing.
great way of putting it.
Yeah, because we have that little sphere of influence, like you said, that 90-10. And even within whatever is within my sphere of influence, I can only really influence. I'm only capable of this right here. Everything outside
Totally,
of this is up to fair chance and luck, and
totally.
it's whatever. But real quick, I do have a question. Where can
Sure.
people find your book?
Yeah, so Selling Sanity can be found on
Okay.
Amazon.com, and it's ebook and paperback right now.
Hmm.
I think sometime in November I'll have a audiobook version out. And then if anybody
Okay.
wants to chat with me personally, I can always be found. My name is spelt very uniquely, so as far as I know, I'm the only Corey Gentry spelt the name that my name is spelt in the
Hmm.
world. And you can find me on CoreyGentry.com
Okay.
or GentryConsultingServices.com, and I can be reached there anytime.
Gotcha. So we're going to take this book out of the link real quick, just in case. But there we go. Gentryconsulting.com on the screen.
Perfect.
um,
Amazing.
yeah. But one of the things that I've got to ask, and I know we talked about this during the pre-recording because that's just kind of how things go. Uh, we can see you on in the future because I mean we've dived into your story, but now it's really time to kind of dissect more of the red flags, what people can kind of look out for, maybe a little bit more, or maybe things that they could do with their teen at home before they decide to have someone else do a parent's job.
I would love that.
Hell yeah.
I would really love that. Yeah, particularly the former. I would
Okay.
really, really, I would really like that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would. It would be my pleasure to come on and just
Yeah. And
answer all those questions.
hell yeah. And then we can maybe draw up some more parallels and stuff like that because my recovery journey was kind of interesting because I was in a treatment program, but that was the thing is that it was different. It was way different than I ever like could have thought it was. But whenever you were talking about the experience you were in, I was like, wait, how much different was mine actually? It's kind of weird. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's very strange, and I'm one of the anomalies in that treatment program. So it's one of those like I it's very very strange how the world works, but
It
I'm
really is. Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited to get you back on, but I got one final question before we let everything go
Absolutely.
for the night. So, Dr. Corey Gentry, the name of this podcast is Retrieving Sanity, and we explore how all facets of living life impact mental health. Looking at the incredible motley adventures of your life, what does retrieving sanity personally mean to you today, and what's one practice or perspective you believe is crucial for anyone else on that journey?
Yeah. For me, retrieving sanity is really, uh, I think it's a way of just being able to integrate into yourself,
Mm,
because there's no getting out of this body and this being that we're in while we're here. So really, our journey is to just figure out how to be comfortable with this, that little hula hoop area that you were talking about. And the best way that I've found to do that is, I'm really a big believer in trauma processing work. And
mm,
the biggest thing for me that was eye opening and all of that was really doing a lot of like trauma processing therapy,
mm,
everything from like somatic experiencing to EMDR to good old fashioned trauma processing. Like some of it is a little hokey and whatever, but like inner child work,
yeah.
journaling, all of that
Hmm.
stuff, it all really helps. And for me, what was a big game changer in my life was not looking at my mental health as this like kind of St. Paul road to Damascus kind of moment where I just had this
Hmm.
massive conversion experience.
Uh-huh.
But it's like it's more uh, like brushing my teeth.
Mm,
It's
yeah.
like it's little things that I do every day. These kind of habits that while I'm doing them, I'm like, why am I doing this? This makes no difference whatsoever. Like, this is pointless.
Uh-huh.
But it's more that I notice when I don't do them for a little while.
Mhm.
And for me, that's been like the biggest thing for people uh, that are on that road to recovery or reconciliation or whatever you want to call it. Is
Mhm.
it's the little things that you do day in day out that really really make a difference,
Mhm.
and that really ultimately move the needle.
Yeah. Mm. Thank you for that. That is very insightful, and I mean, I have to agree with you on all of that because I haven't heard anyone really say that retrieving sanity is integrating yourself with yourself like that, because I'd have to say that's probably my favorite one so far, because
Oh,
it just it makes sense because if you're not comfortable within your own skin, how can you claim to be sane, you know? So,
yeah, it's
uh
very difficult.
yeah, this is hugely difficult. I nay
Yeah,
impossible. Um,
yeah.
but with this being said, Dr. Corey, I thank you very much for being on the show today because we have
Thank you.
had an amazing conversation and I'm looking forward to just doing a big old dive into even more troubled institutions for troubled youth, you know. So uh let's see. I think we got your website up. I'm showing it one more time. And we got everything else kind of figured out, I think. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave the audience with this evening?
No, just thanks so much for being here, and please check out my website, and I hope everyone will check out my book.
Sweet. Yeah, I think that they should because Selling Sanity, I read this title of it and I was like, hey, wait a minute. Basically like what would that be? Like uh soul sequels or something like that? Like I don't
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's just what a lot of the people in the mental health industry are
Mhm,
trying to do. They're trying to sell you something that's their version of it doesn't exist.
mhm.
It's a fugazi.
Yeah.
It's not real.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the people that are trying to sell it are the ones that are the most loud and obnoxious and garner the most attention. So we have to make a little bit of noise ourselves too. make ourselves look a little bit
Absolutely.
like a fool.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But with that being said, oh, did you?
No,
Okay.
I'm here.
With that being said, everyone out there, thank you for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. This has been Keegan, and this has been Dr. Corey Gentry, and we will see you on our next episode. But you've got to love yourself in the meantime. Try to love others if you can, but you've got to love yourself first. And don't forget, if you're having a mental health crisis, give the number 988 a call if you are within the US. And if you really need to, there's also the Trevor Project up in Canada for the LGBTQ friends out there. So, everyone out there, just much love to you all, and we will see you next week. Shalom.